Imagine waking up and you fully expect to be dead. Like you are lying on the side of a literal erupting volcano and you are completely, utterly out of options.
Yeah, the ground is just tearing itself apart beneath you.
Exactly. You have given everything. I mean, you spent every last drop of your physical and mental reserve, and you have finally just accepted that this is the end. The dark closes in, you close your eyes, and then you open them.
Right, which is the last thing you'd expect to happen.
Right. But instead of ash and fire, you hear water. You hear the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze. You hear music, and you hear the familiar voice of an old friend, a mentor you honestly thought you had lost forever calling your name.
It's just such a powerful shift.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today we are talking about what happens the day after you save the world.
Which is, a remarkably complicated thing. We are really stepping into the narrative muddy waters of the aftermath here. Because the end of the ultimate war doesn't instantly mean the beginning of peace.
Yeah, surviving a great ordeal doesn't mean you automatically know how to live again.
Yeah.
And that is kind of the central premise of our mission today. We're exploring the complex, often completely misunderstood anatomy of a happy ending.
Right. What actually makes a happy ending work?
Exactly. We want to look at why the most emotionally resonant, deeply satisfying conclusions to massive struggles are actually the ones that flat out refuse to wrap things up with a neat little bow.
And to do this, we are pulling from a really fantastic piece of analysis. It was created for the Princess Toyner channel.
Oh, I love their stuff.
It's so good, right? It's a review titled After the Shadow, Triumph and Humility at Cormallen. And it zeroes in on an incredibly pivotal, but honestly, often overshadowed moment in literature.
Right, we're talking about Book 6, Chapter 4, The Return of the King, the chapter titled The Field of Cormallen.
Yeah. It is a chapter that acts as the emotional linchpin for the entire narrative. I mean, the massive, earth-shattering climax at Mount Doom has literally just occurred.
Right, the ring is gone.
Exactly. And conventional storytelling logic dictates that the story should basically end there, or maybe, after a super quick victory lap. But Tolkien forces us to sit in the immediate, messy, disorienting aftermath.
And if you are listening to this right now, I really want to set the stakes for why this matters to you. Because this conversation, it's for anyone who has ever reached the end of a massive, grueling undertaking.
Which is pretty much everyone at some point.
Right. Maybe it was a multi-year project at work that just consumed your entire life. Or maybe it was a major life transition, like defending a dissertation or a brutal medical battle.
Or just surviving a seemingly impossible personal challenge.
Yeah. You finally cross that finish line. The villain is defeated. The goal is achieved. You look around, the dust settles, and you just ask yourself, well, what now?
Because honestly, reality doesn't offer a freeze-frame high five as the credits roll. I mean, you still have to wake up the next morning.
Yeah, you really do.
The adrenaline leaves your system, and you are left holding the pieces of a life that has been fundamentally altered by the struggle.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start by looking at the psychology of that sudden relief. The Princess Toyner review vividly points out the transition here.
Right, the shift from that crushing tension of Mount Doom.
Exactly. It goes from that crushing tension to the profound, almost violently disorienting relief of waking up in Ithilien. We are coming off a climax of unparalleled intensity. Frodo and Sam are on the slopes of Mount Doom, and they have accepted their deaths.
And then suddenly, the rescue, the awakening.
Yeah, the review notes this as one of the most comforting moments in the entire story. But I really want to dig into the mechanics of why it hits us, the audience, so incredibly hard.
Well, we have to look at how the text is mirroring the physiological state of the reader. By the time we reach this chapter, we have been subjected to thousands of pages of compounding dread.
It really is compounding. It just gets heavier and heavier.
Exactly. It's a masterclass in sensory deprivation and psychological oppression. I mean, think about the march across Gorgroth. The air is toxic. The landscape is completely barren.
There's literally no water, no light, no hope.
Right. The author starves the characters, and by extension, the reader of anything remotely pleasant or life-affirming.
It's like literary asphyxiation.
Oh, that is a perfect way to describe it. So when the ring is unmade and the mountain erupts, the tension doesn't just dissipate, it shatters.
Yeah.
But if Tolkien had immediately cut to a grand victory parade in Minas Tirith, it would have felt incredibly jarring. Unearned, even.
Because the reader's nervous system hasn't had time to downregulate, right?
Exactly. We need that transition just as much as the characters do.
It's the cortisol crash. I'm thinking about how this works in our own bodies. Like, imagine you've been studying for a make or break, utterly terrifying final exam.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Right. Or you're an athlete who spent 2 years training for an impossibly stressful competition. You are running on pure adrenaline and cortisol for months.
You're just in survival mode.
Completely. And then you finish the event, you hand in the paper, your body is entirely braced for the crash, and you expect to just collapse into a heap.
But then you wake up the next morning, and the alarm doesn't go off.
Yeah. You see the sun shining through the blinds, you hear cars driving by outside. The sheer mundanity of the world continuing to exist feels shocking.
It's the disorientation of peace. When you have existed in a state of high alert survival for so long, the absence of a threat actually registers as a shock to the system.
It's wild how that works.
It is. And the Princess Toynard analysis emphasizes how the narrative provides this necessary breathing room. When Frodo and Sam wake up in the woods of Ithilien, surrounded by sunlight and running water, it's a very deliberate thing.
It's like a sensory reintroduction.
Exactly. The scent of the trees, the soft light, it is a deliberate sensory reintroduction to the living world. The author is slowly walking the reader back from the edge of the abyss.
Gandalf's voice is the anchor in all of that.
He really is. He is the tether to their past, to the world before the trauma. Waking up to his voice provides a bridge between the nightmare they just survived and the reality they are returning to.
But notice that the text doesn't rush this. It lingers on their confusion for a bit.
Right. It lets the relief wash over them slowly. This is the whole concept of earned catharsis. We feel the immense floating lightness of their survival because the narrative forced us to feel the unbearable weight of the darkness first.
Okay, so the internal relief is absolutely staggering. But what I find even more compelling, and the reviews spend a lot of time on this, is what happens when they actually step out into the wider world.
Oh, yeah. The external reaction.
Yeah, the internal relief transitions into this massive external celebration. And the way the outside world reacts to their survival introduces a total subversion of power dynamics.
It really flips the script.
It totally flips the script on what the people of Middle-earth, and honestly what we as a society, typically value.
We are talking about the celebration on the field of Cormallen, right? The grand honoring of the ring bearer.
Yes, we have the massive armies of the West, the free peoples, hardened warriors, captains of men, elves, dwarves, and they're all throwing a parade for Frodo and Sam.
Two small, non-combatant, profoundly unassuming individuals.
Right. We were looking at a scene where literal kings are bowing to hobbits.
What's fascinating here is the thematic implication of this scene. It's truly revolutionary. The analysis explicitly points out that Tolkien is establishing a hierarchy of deeds.
And he places humility and loyalty at the top of that hierarchy, right?
Absolutely. Humility, loyalty, and quiet endurance are at the absolute pinnacle, far above raw martial power. These heroes did not defeat the ultimate evil through tactical genius, or by wielding some magic sword, or by overwhelming force.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate and push back on this premise just a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
We just spent hundreds of pages reading about the Siege of Gondor, the Charge of the Rohirrim, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. These are unbelievable acts of physical valor and martial sacrifice.
They absolutely are.
So, if this moment at Cormallen is telling us that quiet endurance and loyalty are the ultimate powers, does that completely upend how we view those massive battles? Does that make all that sword swinging and cavalry charging secondary, or worse, just a distraction?
Well, it doesn't negate it, but it deeply recontextualizes it. The martial power was absolutely necessary, of course, but it was fundamentally a delaying tactic.
A delaying tactic.
Yeah. The armies of the West were fighting the symptoms of the disease. They were holding back the fever so the patient wouldn't die before the cure could be administered. Frodo and Sam were fighting the cause of the disease.
Wow, okay. So the armies couldn't actually win the war. They could only prevent the war from being lost on that specific day.
Precisely. No army, no matter how vast or courageous, could have marched into Mordor and destroyed the ring. Sauron would have crushed them. The raw power of the West was entirely insufficient to solve the root problem.
Right, because hard power can't unmake the ring.
Exactly. The only thing that could solve it was the willingness of someone to carry an unbearable burden to the very end, simply out of love for the world and a sense of duty.
That's incredibly poignant.
It is. The kings bowing to the hobbits is an acknowledgement from the architects of hard power that soft power, endurance, sacrifice, humility is what actually saved them.
This maps so perfectly onto how we operate in our own careers and communities, and frankly, how backwards we often get it.
Oh, completely backwards.
We almost exclusively throw parades for the loud, raw power victories. We promote the charismatic executive who comes in, shakes everything up, and gives the rousing keynote speech.
Right, the person making all the noise.
Yeah. We idolize the salesperson who lands the flashy multi-million-dollar client. We constantly reward highly visible, aggressive action.
Which is basically the modern equivalent of the cavalry charge.
Yes, that's exactly it. But think about the person who manages the spreadsheets every single day for 3 years. The person who quietly smooths over the interpersonal conflicts in the office so the team doesn't implode.
The glue that holds the whole operation together.
Exactly. The person who stays late to fix the coding errors without demanding a microphone to announce it. That quiet endurance is almost always what actually gets the grueling project across the finish line. But they rarely get the parade.
They almost never get the parade. The Field of Cormallen is essentially a utopian vision of a society that actually recognizes and honors the invisible labor of endurance.
It really is.
The kings are essentially saying, we made the noise, but you did the work. It's a profound moment of leadership recognizing its own limits. They do not try to co-opt the hobbits' victory, they submit to it.
But, even as the world is cheering for them and singing songs about them, the Princess Toynard review draws our attention to a very stark contrast.
Right, a contrast in how Frodo and Sam internally process this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. The world is throwing confetti, but the heroes themselves are experiencing something much darker and more complicated. Because surviving a great ordeal does not mean escaping it unchanged.
And this is where the narrative maturity of the text really reveals itself. It refuses to be overly sentimental about the aftermath. The trauma is not magically erased just because they won.
No, not at all.
The analysis highlights the duality in their reactions perfectly. Sam experiences what they call a bewildered humility, while Frodo carries a much quieter emotional tone.
Let's break down the mechanics of that duality because it's fascinating. Sam's reaction makes sense to me on a surface level. He's a gardener who got swept up in a geopolitical apocalypse.
Right, he was literally just trimming the hedges.
Exactly. He's bewildered because his motivations were never about saving the world.
Sam's motivations were entirely localized. He wanted to protect his friend and he wanted to go home. The grand scale of the War of the Ring never really penetrated his core identity.
Because he wasn't the ring bearer.
Right, because he didn't bear the ring itself for the vast majority of the journey. His soul wasn't exposed to the corrosive, radioactive nature of the ultimate evil in the same way Frodo's was.
So Sam is sort of the baseline.
Yeah, Sam represents the grounded innocence that somehow managed to survive the journey intact. His bewilderment at the parade is the reaction of an ordinary man who literally cannot comprehend why ordinary decency is being treated like a godlike achievement.
But Frodo is the one who actually achieved the impossible. He carried the burden. He succeeded. Shouldn't he feel the biggest wave of triumph out of anyone there? Why is he the quietest one in the room?
Well, because you cannot be the vessel for that kind of darkness and remain unchanged. Frodo was subjected to a spiritual attrition that completely hollowed him out.
It's so sad to think about it that way.
It is. I want to use an analogy of forging here. If you take a lump of iron and subject it to extreme heat, hammering it on an anvil over and over again, you can forge it into a magnificent sword to fight a war.
Right, it becomes this powerful tool.
Exactly. But when the war is over, you can't just stick that sword back in the garden and expect it to behave like a lump of iron again. The fire fundamentally changed its molecular structure.
Wow, that is a chilling way to put it. The molecular structure of his mind has been completely altered.
It has. And Frodo's quietness is the realization of that alteration. He is sitting at a feast thrown in his honor, celebrating the saving of a world that he knows deep down he no longer fits into.
That isolation has to be deafening.
It's heartbreaking. The text is laying the groundwork for a really profound psychological truth. Victory and healing are not the same thing.
So what does this all mean? I want to pause on that because it's vital.
Yeah.
Victory and healing are not the same thing. The geopolitical victory, the destruction of the enemy, happens in an instant.
Right. The ring goes into the fire, Sauron falls, the tower collapses, boom, victory.
But the psychological healing, That's entirely different.
It operates on an entirely different timeline, and in some cases, honestly, it may never fully conclude. The analysis makes it clear that while the external darkness is broken, the internal healing for Frodo hasn't even truly begun. He is experiencing the profound isolation of the survivor.
If you are listening to this right now, and you have ever survived intense burnout or a prolonged period of intense personal crisis, maybe caring for a sick relative or navigating a brutal legal battle.
Yeah, those long-term draining crises.
Exactly. The crisis finally resolves. The papers are signed, the remission is announced, whatever it is. Everyone around you wants to pop champagne. They're saying, "You did it, it's over. You must be so happy."
But inside, you're just numb.
Yes. You are sitting there amidst the celebration, feeling completely hollow. You are physically present, but psychologically, a part of you is still trapped in the hospital room or the courtroom or on the side of that volcano.
Because the people celebrating are celebrating the result. You, on the other hand, are still processing the cost.
Exactly. You can't just flip a switch and revert to the before version of yourself.
Yeah.
And what makes this chapter so brilliant is that it scales this psychological realism up to the macro level.
It does. It applies it to everything.
The understanding that trauma requires careful, measured handling doesn't just apply to the internal lives of the hobbits. It becomes the governing philosophy for how the entire kingdom is handled in the aftermath of the war.
Which brings us perfectly to the analysis of Aragorn and the true nature of leadership.
Yes, let's get into that.
Yeah.
We are looking at an absolute masterclass in the restraint of power. Sauron is defeated. The ultimate threat is gone. The city of Minas Tirith is saved.
But Gondor has not yet formally received its king.
Right. Aragorn, the rightful heir who has just led the armies to victory, does something incredibly counterintuitive. He refuses to enter the city as a king.
He literally refuses to claim the throne immediately.
He sets up a tent outside the city gates and just waits. So why? The war is won. The enemy is dead. Why sit in a tent outside the walls? What is the mechanism behind this delay?
It is the mechanism of legitimacy. Aragorn understands a fundamental truth about governance. Victory in war is only the destructive phase of leadership.
The destructive phase, I like that.
Yeah, you have destroyed the threat. But restoring peace, building a functional, cohesive society out of a traumatized population, that requires unquestionable legitimacy. And legitimacy cannot be forced.
Because if he marches straight into the city in his armor, surrounded by his victorious soldiers, over the rubble and the bodies of the fallen, and just demands the crown.
He looks like a conqueror. Even if he is the rightful heir, entering by force of arms triggers the psychological defenses of a populace that has just endured a horrific siege.
They're already on edge.
Highly on edge. They have just survived a tyrant. They're incredibly sensitive to anyone behaving like one. Aragorn recognizes that the city is in a state of collective trauma.
So how does he bypass those psychological defenses? If he can't march in as a king, what does he do?
By entering as a healer. The lore states that the hands of the king are the hands of a healer. He enters the city unannounced, without his armor, wearing a simple cloak, and he goes directly to the houses of healing.
To tend to the sick and the wounded.
Exactly. He doesn't demand authority, he provides service. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows that true leadership in peacetime requires profound humility.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This contrast with modern leadership models is just staggering.
Oh, it's night and day.
Think about how often leaders today, whether in politics, corporate environments, or even the influencer space, act. The absolute microsecond of victory is achieved a successful launch, an election, a viral moment. The immediate instinct is to rush to the microphone.
Right, to claim the win.
It is a desperate scramble to plant the flag and say, "I did this," validate my power, acknowledge my status. What does Aragorn's kind of restraint say about true confidence?
Well, it shows that modern leadership is often driven by anxiety. The rush to claim credit stems from an underlying fear that your authority is actually fragile.
Like if you don't grab it, someone else will.
Exactly. If you don't aggressively assert your dominance, someone else will take the credit, or the people will doubt your right to lead. Aragorn's restraint, then, is a display of terrifying self-assurance.
He knows who he is.
He completely knows. He doesn't need to force the people to acknowledge his title, because he is already doing the work of the title. He waits for the people of the city to realize who he is and to invite him to take the throne.
He allows the demand for his leadership to generate organically from the bottom up, rather than imposing it from the top down.
It is the crucial difference between demanding submission and earning consent. By waiting, by serving, he transforms the coronation from a military occupation into a mutual covenant between the ruler and the ruled. It is a profound lesson in the power of patience.
It really makes you look at your own life. When you accomplish something major, you finish the project, you get the degree, you solve the crisis. Can you exercise that kind of patience in the claiming phase?
That's the real challenge.
It is. Can you focus on continuing to provide value, continuing to serve your team or your community, and just trust that the recognition and the legitimacy will follow? Or do you immediately demand the spotlight, risking alienating the very people you want to lead?
And what the Princess Toynard review highlights so beautifully here is that Aragorn's refusal to rush his coronation perfectly mirrors Tolkien's structural decision regarding the narrative itself.
Oh, the pacing of the book.
Yes, the author exhibits the exact same restraint as his future king. He completely, absolutely refuses to rush the end of the book.
Let's transition into that structural brilliance, because if you look at almost any other fantasy story or action movie or sci-fi epic, the Field of Cormallen is the final scene.
It's where the credits would roll.
Exactly. The Death Star blows up, they get the medals, everyone cheers, cut to black. The ring is destroyed, the Eagles rescue them, they wake up to a parade. The end.
It has all the traditional markers of a conclusion. The catharsis is achieved, the primary antagonist is neutralized, the protagonists are rewarded and recognized. A lesser writer would have absolutely stopped right there.
But Tolkien keeps going. The review states, real endings are complicated. And I just love that the analysis focuses on the concept of the ongoing checklists of reality.
The logistics of peace. We rarely see the logistics of peace in fiction because, let's face it, it isn't inherently glamorous.
No, it's a lot of paperwork, honestly.
It really is. The sword fights are over. Now comes the administrative burden of ending an era. The review notes that there are still formal ceremonies to conduct. There are entire kingdoms that need to be systematically restored.
There are supply lines to establish, traumatized soldiers to demobilize.
Exactly. And incredibly long, mundane journeys back home that still need to be undertaken.
I want to break down why this matters so much, because the movie ending versus the real ending is a dynamic we all experience in real life.
Oh, constantly.
Let's use an analogy. Think about a wedding. The movie ending of a wedding is the kiss at the altar. Or maybe it's the couple running out of the reception through a shower of sparklers, getting into a vintage car and driving off into the night.
The perfect photo op.
Right. That is the Field of Cormallen. Perfect framing, high emotion, ultimate catharsis.
But the narrative doesn't stop at the sparklers.
Right. The real ending of the wedding is waking up the next morning with a hangover. It's driving back to the venue in sweatpants to collect the leftover centerpieces and figure out what to do with 3 extra tiers of cake.
And the thank you notes. Oh, the thank you notes.
Yes. It is the agonizing 6-month process of writing 300 personalized thank you notes. It's sitting at a kitchen table with a laptop trying to figure out how to legally combine your bank accounts and update your insurance.
Or consider launching a massive startup. The movie ending is launch day. You ring the bell, the app goes live, the champagne pops in the office.
Everyone's cheering.
But the real ending is the next morning when the servers inevitably crash, the customer service inbox is flooded with complaints, and you actually have to figure out the day-to-day operations of the business you just birthed.
The sparklers and the launch parties are just moments in time.
Yeah.
The cleanup, the administration, the operations, that is reality.
And by forcing us to sit through the cleanup of Middle-earth, the author grounds the sweeping, mythic fantasy in profound psychological and practical reality.
The Princess Toynard analysis argues that this inclusion of the transitional work is what makes the narrative feel emotionally complete.
It validates the struggle.
Yeah. If the world simply snapped back to perfection the moment the ring was destroyed, it would imply that the damage wasn't real. By showing the painstaking, methodical process of rebuilding, the narrative proves that the aftermath of the victory matters just as much as the victory itself.
It's such a grounded approach.
So if you're listening, this is a call to embrace the complicated, messy nature of your own endings. When you finish a chapter in your life, you graduate, you quit the job, you move to a new city, don't feel disillusioned when the sparklers burn out and you find yourself holding a broom, sweeping up the metaphorical confetti.
Sweeping is part of the process.
It is. Finishing always requires transitional work. The paperwork, the awkward goodbye coffees, the unboxing of your new life. It's not a failure, the happy ending. It's a feature. It is the necessary friction required to actually close the loop.
However, this extended ending, this lingering in the transitional space, It serves another crucial narrative function.
Oh, this is the sad part.
Yeah. By stretching out the aftermath, the author allows a new, much more complex emotion to creep into the story. A bittersweet undertone begins to emerge from beneath the joy of the victory.
The fading of myth.
Yes, the review astutely points out that the celebration at Carmelen is tinged with the inescapable sense that the world is fundamentally changing, and not entirely for the better. The age of magic, of elves and high kings, is coming to an end.
It's the ultimate cost of the victory. Have you ever succeeded at something so completely that you accidentally outgrew the space you were in? Because the paradox here is that by saving the world, they have guaranteed the end of the world as they knew it.
Right, the power of the elven rings was tied to the existence of the One Ring.
So with Sauron destroyed, the magic that sustained places like Lothlorien and Rivendell begins to fade. The elves must leave across the sea. The age of humanity, a much more mundane, grounded, ordinary age, is beginning.
This raises an important question about the nature of progress. Progress inherently requires loss. Surviving the great ordeal means the world is now free to move forward, but moving forward always means leaving things behind.
You can't take everything with you.
No, you can't. The sheer beauty, the wonder, the high magic of the previous age was intrinsically tied to the existential struggle against that great evil. With the evil eradicated, the high stakes evaporate, and the magic evaporates right along with them.
This resonates so deeply with the human experience of outgrowing a space.
Outgrowing the container you fought so hard to build.
Exactly. Imagine you are the undisputed expert in a specific department at your company, or the senior student in a rigorous academic program. You master the material. You become the mentor, the hero of that specific microcosm.
You basically win that game.
You win. But in doing so, you complete your journey there. You can't stay. To keep growing, you have to graduate. You have to leave the world where you were a titan and enter a new, likely much more ordinary world where you were a beginner all over again.
And there is a profound grief in that transition, even when it is a purely positive step forward.
It's a very specific kind of grief.
It is. The review observes that in this specific chapter, the author doesn't plunge fully into the depths of that melancholy just yet. The focus remains largely on the relief and the honor. But the seeds of that melancholy are definitely planted.
You can feel the seasons changing.
You really can. It tempers the celebration and serves as a quiet reminder that no joy, no victory is entirely without cost.
It's the feeling of looking around a room full of your closest friends after the most amazing, life-altering experience. It can be the last night of summer camp or the wrap party of a massive creative project.
And you just know it's over.
Yeah, you suddenly realize the sinking feeling in your chest that you will probably never all be together in this exact same way ever again. The project was a success, but a success means the experience is over.
It is the tragedy of time moving in only one direction. And the Princess Toynard analysis gives us a perfect concluding thought that bridges this chapter to the rest of the book.
It reminds us why the field of Cormallin is merely a transitional camp and not the final destination.
Right. The review states, the story isn't finished, the king has not yet taken the throne, the fellowship has not yet fully parted, and the Shire itself still waits in the distance.
The Shire itself still waits in the distance. That brings us full circle on today's deep dive. We have taken a massive journey through the mechanics of a truly earned ending.
We really covered a lot of ground today.
We did. We started by dissecting the physiological and psychological shock of waking up alive, the vital necessity of giving the reader and the characters the space to process the absence of crushing tension.
And then we analyzed the revolutionary subversion of power on the field of Cormallin, exploring how the narrative elevates the quiet, invisible labor of endurance far above the loud, visible triumphs of martial strength.
We saw kings bow to hobbits in a utopian acknowledgement of soft power.
We looked at the terrifying duality of trauma through the lens of Frodo and Sam, understanding that surviving an ordeal molecularly changes a person, and that victory and healing are entirely separate timelines.
We examined Aragorn's masterclass in leadership, too. The profound restraint required to build legitimacy through service, rather than demanding authority through conquest.
And finally, we explored the structural necessity of the logistics of peace, the realization that the messy administrative cleanup of the aftermath is what grounds the myth in reality, even as it introduces the bittersweet, melancholic fading of an era.
It is just a staggering amount of thematic density, psychological realism, and structural brilliance packed into what could have been a simple, disposable victory lap of a chapter.
It really is a masterpiece of a chapter.
And listen, if you are captivated by this kind of deep literary analysis, if dissecting the mechanics of character arcs, trauma, and mythic storytelling is what you love, you absolutely need to check out the Princess Coin Nerd YouTube channel.
Highly recommend it.
The review we utilize today is just scratching the surface of their incredible chapter-by-chapter breakdowns and magical fandom discussions. It is the perfect place to continue exploring the hidden depths of these stories.
There is always more beneath the surface. No text is ever truly exhausted if you know how to ask it the right questions.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thread to pull on. It builds directly on that ominous, beautiful final thought from the review that the Shire itself still waits in the distance.
The inevitable return home.
We've spent a lot of time discussing how Frodo has been permanently, fundamentally altered by his journey. He has been hollowed out. His quietness amidst the cheering armies is the proof of his internal molecular change.
He's not the same hobbit who left.
So, I want you to imagine what happens when a person who has been permanently transformed by a horrific struggle finally has to pack their bags and return to a home that hasn't changed at all.
The Shire is perfectly preserved in amber. It is aggressively ordinary, completely innocent, and entirely ignorant of the price that was paid to keep it that way.
Exactly. If your victory happened far away on the slopes of a distant volcano, or in the high-stakes boardroom of another company, or in the isolated private quiet of a hospital room, how do you reintegrate your transformed, scarred, experienced self into the completely untouched, mundane world that is waiting for you back home?
Do you pretend you haven't changed and try to force yourself back into the mold of your old life?
Or do you have to confront the heartbreaking reality that the home you fought so desperately to save is a place where you no longer belong?
It is the final and perhaps the most agonizing test of any great journey, the challenge of surviving the peace.
Something to mull over as you navigate your own endings and aftermaths. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the mechanics of the stories you love, and we'll see you next time.